Jake sat quietly across from Lily in the dimly lit Italian restaurant, the gentle music and soft candlelight setting a cozy mood that had always been their little escape from life's demands. However, tonight felt different. Jake could sense a subtle tension in Lily's posture, her eyes darting nervously around, and her fingers fidgeting with the napkin. After years together, he knew her well enough to realize something was simmering beneath the surface. Then, without any lead-up, Lily looked directly into his eyes and dropped the bombshell. "I've been thinking, maybe we could try something to reignite the spark," she started, her voice forcedly casual but laced with a hint of excitement. Jake chuckled, taken aback. "What do you mean, Lily?" he asked, trying to hide his surprise. Lily hesitated, taking a deep breath as if gathering her courage. "Maybe we could give each other a free pass, you know, just one night to explore, just to see if we're missing out on something," she suggested, her words hanging in the air like a thick, unmovable fog. Jake blinked, struggling to grasp what she had just proposed. His heart raced, his pulse pounding in his ears as disbelief, anger, and heartbreak swirled within him. "A free pass," he managed to say, attempting to keep his face neutral despite the storm raging inside him. "So, you want to be with other people?" he asked, his voice steady, though his chest tightened painfully. He had always trusted her, and this suggestion from the woman he believed to be his soulmate shattered something fundamental within him. Lily let out a light laugh, almost dismissive. "Not permanently, just once. Just one night to explore, to see what it's like," she said, her tone too casual as though she were suggesting a new recipe rather than a decision that could tear their marriage apart. Jake remained silent, his eyes locked on hers, searching for any sign of regret or hesitation. Instead, all he could see was a spark of anticipation, a glimmer that had once been reserved only for him. Slowly, he nodded, maintaining his composure. "If that's what you really want, Lily, we'll talk about it when we get home," he replied softly. The rest of the meal continued in awkward silence, both lost in their own thoughts. Jake's mind raced, formulating a plan. He felt no urge to act in anger. No, he wanted to handle this carefully. It was clear now that Lily's loyalty didn't run as deep as his, but he wasn't about to compromise his own values. If she wanted freedom, he would give it to her, but not without consequences. That night, as they lay side by side in bed, Jake remained awake, staring at the ceiling. He could hear Lily's even breathing as she slept peacefully beside him, as if she hadn't just shattered his world hours earlier. Her request replayed in his mind like a broken record, each word cutting deeper than the last. For years, he had given her his loyalty and devotion, prioritizing their relationship above everything. Yet, in an instant, she had made it clear it wasn't enough. Unable to sleep, Jake quietly grabbed his phone and texted his closest friend, Max, seeking advice. Within seconds, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. "Jake, what's going on? Are you okay?" Max asked, concern evident in his voice. Jake took a deep breath, recounting everything that had happened at the restaurant. When he finished, there was a long silence on the other end before Max finally spoke. "Jake, this isn't about you," Max said steadily. "It's about her. She's the one lacking respect for what you've built together. But if you can stay calm, I'll support you. Just, be sure you know what you're doing." Jake nodded, his mind made up. "I want to give her this free pass," he said quietly, "but on my terms." In the following days, the dynamic between Jake and Lily changed subtly. Lily seemed convinced that Jake had accepted the idea and even grew more affectionate toward him. She appeared to believe that he too was viewing her suggestion as an exciting opportunity, perhaps thinking they would both explore this newfound freedom together. Jake, however, observed her closely, analyzing her every move and word. He saw through the facade, something had already been set in motion, and he was determined to uncover the truth. One evening, while they were watching TV together, Jake casually asked, "So, have you thought about who you'd use your free pass on?" Lily seemed caught off guard, her eyes widening momentarily before she quickly composed herself, laughing nervously. "It's not like I have anyone in mind, Jake," she replied. "I just thought maybe we both needed something fresh and exciting. Don't you ever get bored?" Jake forced a smile, masking the bitterness of her words. "Bored? Not really, but I understand if that's how you feel." Internally, he felt a surge of anger, but he kept his tone calm and his expression neutral. He needed to gather more information before making his move. Behind Lily's back, Jake began laying the groundwork. He discreetly met with a lawyer, setting up the necessary steps to protect his assets and prepare for a potential separation if things went south. He organized his documents, made copies of everything important, and even began moving some belongings to Max's place under the guise of spring cleaning. Every move was calculated and precise. He was preparing for what might become the end of their marriage. Eventually, Lily picked a night to use her free pass, casually mentioning she would be going out with some friends. Jake feigned indifference, wishing her a good time as she left. But as she stepped out, dressed to the nines and wearing stronger perfume than usual, a wave of resentment washed over him. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay composed, merely saying, "Have fun, Lily," as she walked out the door. Jake poured himself a drink, taking in the emptiness of their home. Every corner and piece of furniture held memories of a life he believed they had shared exclusively. Now, those memories felt tarnished, tainted by her betrayal. He glanced at the clock, the hours slipping by as he imagined what she might be doing and with whom she might be spending this free pass. The thought was excruciating, but he endured it, knowing it would strengthen his resolve. In the early morning hours, Lily finally returned home, her makeup smudged, her expression a mix of smug satisfaction and awkward guilt. Jake greeted her casually, concealing his hurt in his knowledge. She seemed almost taken aback by his lack of interest, as if she had expected jealousy or outrage. Instead, he simply said, "I hope you got what you wanted out of it, Lily. I hope it was worth it." The next morning over breakfast, Jake decided it was time to confront her. "Did you enjoy your free pass, Lily?" he asked, his tone deceptively light. Lily laughed, waving off his question casually. "Jake, it was just a one-time thing. Don't take it too seriously. We're still us, right?" But Jake's face hardened, his calm exterior starting to crack. "Are we?" "Because it doesn't feel like it," he replied, his voice heavy with the weight of years of unspoken sacrifices. He stood from the table, his anger simmering beneath the surface as he finally voiced everything he had kept bottled up inside. "Do you even realize how much I've given up for this relationship, Lily? How much I've invested in building this life with you? And you, without a second thought, decide a free pass is what you need?" He watched as she stammered, caught off guard by his intensity. But he wasn't about to back down. "Jake, you wanted freedom, didn't you? Well, congratulations, you have it now, and so will I." In the days that followed, Jake distanced himself even further, coldly detached as he finalized his plans. Everything was set, his finances, the documents, and even his own sense of peace. All that remained now was the execution. He waited, patient, knowing the time was coming when he would give Lily a farewell she'd never see coming. Finally, he told her they needed to talk seriously and suggested they meet at the same Italian restaurant where she had first mentioned the free pass. As they sat facing each other, Jake placed a neatly folded document on the table between them. "I wanted to give you something," he said, his tone calm but icy. "Consider it a response to your request for freedom." Lily's eyes widened in shock as she opened the document, realizing it was a separation agreement. Her expression turned to horror, struggling to grasp the situation. "Jake, this isn't what I wanted," she exclaimed, her voice cracking. "I thought it would just add some excitement. It doesn't mean I don't love you." Jake watched her, his gaze detached. "Love and loyalty aren't temporary, Lily. You asked for freedom, and I'm giving it to you. This is your free pass, the last one you'll ever need from me." He stood and walked away, leaving Lily at the table, her face a mix of regret and desperation. Despite the pain still simmering within him, Jake felt a sudden wave of relief as he exited the restaurant. Yet, he knew this document, shocking as it was just the beginning of her reckoning. She had underestimated him, treating his loyalty like an old, discarded sweater. But Jake had a different plan, one that would show her just how costly her freedom would become. Over the next few days, Jake pulled away further, both emotionally and physically, while Lily, now aware of the gravity of her mistake, tried frantically to win him back. She left him voicemails filled with tearful apologies, sent long messages confessing her moment of weakness, and even begged him to return, swearing nothing had happened on her supposed free pass night. But Jake remained unmoved, sticking to the careful plan he had crafted since that fateful dinner. He listened to her excuses and pleas without offering comfort, only nodding silently, making sure she felt the full weight of her choices, the hollow silence of a marriage stripped of trust. After weeks of this tense standoff, Jake moved out of their shared home and into Max's apartment. For Lily, this was the breaking point. She realized she had pushed him too far. With Jake gone, she had no one left to turn to. His departure plunged her into a whirlpool of regret and confusion, her desperate attempts to contact him falling on deaf ears. Meanwhile, Jake settled into his new life and decided it was time to advance his plan. He wasn't satisfied with just a few weeks of silence and absence. He wanted her to experience the sting of betrayal as deeply as he had felt it. One evening, while sitting with Max, Jake outlined the final step of his plan. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Max asked, clearly concerned. "Yes," Jake replied, his voice firm. "She needs to understand the pain she caused, to know what it's like to be discarded. She took my loyalty for granted, and I won't let her walk away unscathed." Max gave a reluctant nod, recognizing the steely resolve in Jake's eyes. "All right, whatever you need, I'm here." The next day, Jake put his plan into motion. He knew Lily's social circle well enough to know who thrived on gossip, and he made sure to drop a few suggestive comments about moving on and finding someone who valued loyalty. Word spread quickly, and soon enough, Lily heard the rumors. Her curiosity mingled with jealousy and panic as she wondered if Jake had truly moved on. One evening, when Jake returned to his apartment, he found a series of frantic messages from Lily. "Jake, please, I just want to talk. If you're seeing someone else, I need to know. I still love you. I made a mistake, but we can fix this. Please call me." He ignored her messages, letting her stew in uncertainty. But the final blow came when Jake posted a carefully worded message on social media, expressing gratitude for moving forward with someone who truly valued commitment and trust. The reaction was immediate. Lily called, her voice trembling, begging for an explanation. But Jake didn't answer. Her voicemails became increasingly desperate, each one more frantic than the last. When he finally picked up her call, he stayed calm and detached. "Is it true? Are you really with someone else?" she asked, her voice thick with fear. "What difference does it make to you, Lily?" he replied coolly. "You wanted freedom. I'm just giving you what you asked for." "But I didn't mean it like that," she stammered. "I thought we could still be us. I made a mistake, Jake. Please come back." He let her words linger before responding. "No, Lily. This is what you wanted. I was ready to give you my loyalty, my commitment, but you threw it away. Now you have to live with that choice." In the following weeks, Jake methodically dismantled their shared life, meeting with a real estate agent to sell their home. Each step, for him, was a balm to the wound she had inflicted, while for Lily, it was a slow, torturous realization of what she had lost. Finally, Jake decided to meet her one last time at the Italian restaurant where it all began. This time, there was no cozy atmosphere, only the remnants of a love turned cold. Lily arrived looking fragile and exhausted, her eyes red from sleepless nights. "Jake," she whispered, barely able to speak. "I know I hurt you. I thought that freedom would make me feel alive again, that I could come back to you as if nothing happened. But I was wrong. I lost sight of what we had, and I know now that I'll never find it again." He listened without emotion, the regret clear on her face, but he knew better than to be swayed by her remorse. "Lily," he said calmly, "when you asked for that free pass, you didn't just ask for one night. You traded the heart of our marriage for a fleeting thrill. I've spent weeks letting you feel what it's like to be alone, to live with the silence of your choices. Now, I'm ready to move on." Her eyes filled with tears as she reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "Please, Jake, don't leave me. I'll do anything to fix this. Just give me one more chance." He shook his head, his face resolute. "You already had your chance, Lily. You wanted a free pass, and now you have it, a free pass to move on without me." He stood and left her sitting alone, the weight of her actions crashing down on her. As he stepped out into the cool night air, Jake felt a mix of sadness and relief. He had stayed true to himself, given her every chance to hold on to his trust, but she had chosen differently. Now, he was ready to embrace his own freedom, a future built on strength and self-respect. For the first time since that night, Jake felt whole again, prepared to face whatever awaited him next. Jake felt a strange mix of emotions swirling within him as he left the restaurant, yet there was an undeniable lightness, a sense of closure. The cool night air wrapped around him like a comforting embrace, whispering the promise of new beginnings. He had walked away from what once was the most meaningful relationship of his life, but the betrayal had transformed his love into something unrecognizable, a hollow echo of what it once was. And in this moment, Jake realized that he had chosen himself for the first time in a very long time. The following morning, Jake began the process of tying up the final loose ends. His decision to sell their shared home was more than just a practical move, it was symbolic. Every piece of furniture, every photo on the wall, and even the faint memories hidden in the corners of the rooms were reminders of the life they had built together. He watched as the real estate agent walked through the house, making notes, offering polite comments, but Jake felt numb to it all. The house was no longer his home, it was a relic of a past life he was ready to leave behind. Meanwhile, Lily found herself in a state of spiraling regret. She spent her days replaying every argument, every moment where she had pushed Jake away, realizing too late that she had been the architect of her own heartbreak. Her friends, who once indulged in her complaints about the relationship, now grew distant, leaving her to face the consequences of her decisions alone. She tried one last desperate attempt to reconcile, sending a handwritten letter to Jake's new apartment, pouring out her heart, admitting to every mistake and pleading for just one more chance. Jake received the letter one evening after work. He recognized her handwriting immediately, but instead of the pain he once felt, he only experienced a dull ache, like the soreness of an old wound that had almost healed. He opened it and read her words, filled with apologies and promises, but there was no sincerity in her pleas that he could believe anymore. It was too late. He had given her everything, and when she had the chance to choose him, she chose the thrill of temporary excitement instead. Max watched as Jake crumpled the letter, tossing it into the trash without a second thought. "You sure about this, man?" Max asked, his voice tinged with concern. "I know this hasn't been easy." Jake nodded slowly, a resolute calm settling over him. "I'm certain. She made her choice, and now I've made mine. It's time I start living for myself." In the days that followed, Jake began to embrace his newfound freedom. He reconnected with old friends, started going back to the gym, and even signed up for a weekend hiking trip he'd always put off because Lily never liked the outdoors. Each small step he took away from their shared past felt like a stride toward reclaiming his own identity. One weekend, while out hiking with a group of friends, Jake found himself standing at the edge of a cliff, overlooking a vast, sunlit valley below. The wind whipped through his hair, the scent of pine filling the air. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, letting the feeling of peace wash over him. For the first time in years, he felt truly alive, unburdened by the weight of someone else's expectations. The experience was a stark contrast to the suffocating atmosphere of his final days with Lily. Back in the city, Lily was struggling to come to terms with the new reality. She had underestimated just how strong Jake's resolve was, convinced that her apologies and declarations of love would be enough to win him back. She spent her nights alone, scrolling through social media, torturing herself with Jake's recent posts and the supportive comments from his friends. When she saw a photo of him smiling, hiking in the mountains, she realized just how far away he was from her now, not just physically, but emotionally. He was already living a new chapter, while she remained trapped in the ruins of their old one. Unable to bear the silence any longer, she decided to show up at his apartment unannounced, hoping for a chance to see him face to face. When he opened the door, his expression was one of mild surprise but not warmth. "Lily, what are you doing here?" he asked, his tone polite but distant. "I had to see you, Jake," she said, her voice quivering. "I can't stand the way things ended. I need you to know how much I regret everything. I've been so lost without you." Jake sighed, stepping aside to let her in. He knew this conversation had to happen, but it wouldn't change anything for him. As they sat down, the tension in the room was palpable. Lily looked at him, her eyes pleading, searching for any sign of the man she once knew. "Jake, please," she whispered. "I don't want to lose you. I've realized how wrong I was, how much I took you for granted. I'm willing to do anything to make this right." He looked at her for a long moment, studying her face. He could see the genuine remorse, the fear of loss, but it wasn't enough anymore. He'd spent too many nights alone, feeling the void her betrayal had left, and now that void had been filled with something new, his own self-worth. "I believe you, Lily," he said softly. "I believe that you're sorry. But it doesn't change what happened. It doesn't change how you made me feel, or how much it hurt. And as much as you might regret it now, I can't go back to who I was before. I've moved on, and you need to do the same." Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized there was nothing left to say, nothing that could mend what had been broken. She reached out one last time, but Jake stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. "I wish you well, Lily," he said quietly, walking her to the door. "But this is goodbye." As she walked away, her shoulders hunched and her head bowed, Jake felt a wave of bittersweet relief. It wasn't the triumphant victory he had once fantasized about, but it was closure. He had faced her, faced his own pain, and emerged stronger. In the weeks that followed, Jake continued to build a new life for himself. He enrolled in night classes, picked up painting as a hobby, and even started dating again, though he took things slow, cautious but hopeful. He had learned from his past, but he was no longer defined by it. One evening, as the sun set over the city, casting a golden light through his apartment window, Jake stood by the balcony with a glass of wine in hand. He felt a deep, profound sense of contentment. He had loved and lost, been betrayed and hurt, but he had also found himself in the process. And that, he realized, was worth more than anything he had given up. With a final sip of his wine, he set the glass down and stepped inside, ready to face whatever the next chapter of his life had in store. He was no longer the man who had once sat across from Lily in that Italian restaurant, heartbroken and unsure. He was someone new, stronger, wiser, and finally free. And this time, his freedom was his own.